Britain's transformation from a rural to an industrial economy was a real shock to the system. It happened very quickly. Within just a few decades, more people in Britain were living in cities than in the countryside. This was the first place on earth where that had ever happened. The environment was changed. Huge clouds of smoke covered much of the landscape. The phrase industrial revolution doesn't really do justice to it. It was more of an industrial trauma. The traditional extended family network was undermined as people flocked to the cities in search of jobs. In northern factory towns like Bradford, nearly half the population came from somewhere else. The landscape of the future was urban, and its territory, a whole range of new anxieties. For many Victorians, the source of their worst fears was the city, associated with crime, grime, violence, poverty, and a new form of popular literature sprang into being which fed those fears and fed on those fears. It was aimed at a mass audience. It sensationalized urban horror, fictionalized it, and added all kinds of weird supernatural elements. Characters like Varney the Vampire or Spring-Heeled Jack. It was all done with a flourish and using the language and the imagery of, what else? Gothic. They began with the true crime stories of Newgate prisoners. Then came urban myths. Reports of a cloaked man who attacked women, then flew off over the rooftops. He was given a name and a storyline, the dastardly Spring-Heeled Jack. But Jack began using his superhuman powers to solve crimes and turned into a Batman-style hero. The murderous barber Sweeney Todd was the most enduring creation of the Gothic comics. They were nicknamed Penny Dreadfuls, and they were popular because they tapped into working-class fears about the modern city. It was a place where people, mixed in their millions, no longer really knew each other. Where anyone could do anything and just disappear back into the city's maze of streets. One anxious critic of the Penny Dreadfuls wrote,
"Boys and girls reared in the cellars and garrets of large cities are reading a literature of animal passion and defiant lawlessness. Lives of bad people, crime, madness, and suicide are powerful in preparing the young for convict life."
In fact, the evidence suggests that Penny Dreadfuls worked like a pressure valve, easing urban anxieties. They also boosted adult literacy. Charles Dickens, the most popular writer of the age, would reinvent urban Gothic for the middle classes. There's more than a smattering of the supernatural in Dickens. Think of the ghosts haunting Scrooge in The Christmas Carol. But his Gothic isn't really about ghouls from beyond the grave. It's about the gloom of the industrial here and now. Dickens painted his most vivid picture of modern urban Gothic in Bleak House. It's an epic tale of aristocrats and paupers, country mansions and city squalor. Where is the dark Gothic heart of Dickens's novel? Well, it's certainly not the bleak house of the title, which is actually quite a nice place. It's only gradually, as you read the book, that you realise that Dickens's great Gothic castle, full of terrors and nightmares, is actually London itself. He describes it as if it were a huge labyrinthine, single, multi-celled structure. Instead of being twined with ivy like a Gothic ruin, it has fog creeping across every surface. It's a place full of darkness where you can barely see your hand in front of your face. It has its demons, the crooks and lawyers that suck the lifeblood from the city. It has its lost souls, the poor, stuck in their terrible slums. I think Bleak House was Dickens's way of saying to his reading public, if you're looking for Gothic horror, you don't need to consult your imaginations. The sad truth is, you're actually living in it. There was no welfare safety net in Dickens's London. If you fell on your own. That's why the terrible slum in Bleak House is so aptly known as Tom All Alone's.
These ruined shelters have bred a crowd of foul existence that crawls in and out of gaps in walls and boards and coils itself to sleep in maggot numbers where the rain drips in and comes and goes, fetching and carrying fever and sowing more evil in its every footprint.
Later in the novel, there's a ghoulish echo of penny dreadful tales, as two men who visit the rag and bottle merchant Crook discover he's gone up in smoke, a bizarre case of spontaneous human combustion.
The cat is snarling at something on the ground before the fire. What is it? A charred log of wood or... Oh, horror! He is here, or all that is left of him.
At the book's climax, the tragic Lady Dedlock lies down to die at the gates of a rat-infested pauper's graveyard.
It was a dreadful spot, heaps of dishonored graves and stones hemmed in by filthy houses. On the step I saw, with a cry of pity and horror, a woman lying cold and dead.
The Victorians looked around at the new world they were creating. Sprawling, grimy cities, smoke-belching factories, and felt distinctly uneasy. Just read their literature, look at their art, and you can feel their sense that society was coming apart at the seams, that disaster loomed. The critic John Ruskin spoke of the dark storm cloud of the 19th century, a warning that unless something was done, social and environmental catastrophe lay ahead.